Oh, goody.
Alright, what's going on everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. So, new season is just around the corner, starting out tomorrow, and I figured we would do our monthly review going into the cards that are going to be coming out this season, the spotlights, the past card, and what I think about all these cards, kind of giving a little rating on best to worst. So, quick overview of what we've got coming in the month. Surtur is going to be our season pass card for November, and we're going to have another bonus card addition via the return of Deadpool's Diner sometime later on in the month, giving us access to King cter. In terms of the spotlight caches, first week is going to be Frigga, Copycat, and Red Guardian. Not super high on Frigga right now in the context of the current metagame, but Copycat and Red Guardian are really powerful cards a lot of people skipped, so I think this will be an appealing week to many who are missing those two cards. Then week number 2, we have Malekith with Thena and Valentina. I'm going to be opening this week because I missed Valentina, so want to get a hold of that. I'm sure many people are missing Thena as well, who is a very relevant, powerful meta card. So again, I think this looks like a fairly appealing week if you're missing some of the cards. Week number 3, we have Fenris Wolf, Annihilus, and Werewolf by Night. These two cards, not quite as popular as they used to be. The bounce decks often aren't running Werewolf anymore. The junk decks and clog decks aren't running Annihilus much anymore. So Fenris Wolf looks like it's probably going to be the one to carry that week. And then last but not least, we have Gore the God Butcher, Havoc, and Legion. 2 Series 4 cards in this final week, so again, I think this one might be a little bit less appealing for the other cards and more so be appealing to get a hold of Gore. So those are the weeks. Let's talk about the individual cards themselves, and I'm going to go in the order in which I think they are most powerful to least powerful. First up, Season Pass card, Surtur. I think this card is incredibly powerful. So some of you might not remember, but the Scar deck was super duper strong just, a few months ago, back in the end of, I think, September or mid-September. Basically, before Mockingbird got nerfed to a 6/9, the Scar deck was one of, if not the best deck in the game. I think it was kind of underplayed relative to how powerful it was, but that deck was very, very strong. And even right now, it is still fairly strong. It's just not quite as popular as some of the other things going around, like the Agent Venom piles. But it is by no means a weak deck, and it seems to be getting a 3-drop that was perfectly made for it. Surtur is going to enable free scars much more easily, and you're not just getting a free scar, you're essentially getting a 3/11, which is a really, really powerful stat line, and it'll be even bigger than a 3/11 if you actually play the scar. So this thing gets out of control really, really quickly. There are already a critical mass of powerful 4-cost 10-power cards, especially with some of the more recent buffs we've seen in the last few months for things like Typhoid Mary and Atuma. Now there are a whole lot of options to just play this on turn 3, play a 10 power on turn 4, play a 10 power on turn 5. All of a sudden you have a free scar, and then you can play another 10 power alongside that if you have one. I think this card is going to be very, very strong. I think it's going to 100% have a large impact on the metagame. And I think it's also going to bring back Shang-Chi, which in turn is going to bring back Armor and Cosmo, even though Cosmo's already kind of brought back with the Agent Venom piles. But I think those two cards and Shang are going to really make a big push in this meta, since I think the Tens deck is going to be very strong, if not one of the top decks of the metagame after Surtur's release. It just seems super duper powerful, and compared to all the other cards releasing this season, it seems like the standout one that I think is going to have the greatest impact on the metagame, and it's going to happen immediately because it's the Season Pass card. Next up is Fenris Wolf. So this card, being good or not, is going to depend a lot on the context of the metagame in which it resides. And if this card were to release right now, today, I don't think it would actually be that insane. And the main reason for that is this isn't really a Shang-Chi metagame right now. We aren't having a lot of huge big threats that you're trying to kill with Shang-Chi, and that is when this card is going to shine the brightest, being able to resurrect a big power thing you destroyed from your opponent. Maybe there could be something there with forcing your opponent to discard with Moon Knight or Black Bolt or Silver Samurai or something, but I don't really see that being the way to go for this card. This card feels like a Sarah Control kind of card, or really just any mid-range pile deck that wants to run Shang-Chi to flip a lane. You just play this down early, and then you know if I have Shang to swing one lane, well, I can just bring back the big thing with Fenris Wolf in the other lane, and that gets me 2 lanes. This obviously can be played around, right? Like your opponent can't just put the big thing in the Wolf lane, so that is something to keep in mind, but especially because of Surtur likely bringing about the return of the 10 power cards deck, I think this will be very good. Will it be good enough to kind of combat that deck? I'm not entirely sure because of the fact that most of those decks are probably going to be running Cosmo and Armor for some much needed Shang-Chi protection. But obviously they're not going to get Cosmo and Armor every game, and they're incentivized to spread their 10 power cards across the board, so I think that makes it a bit more likely that Fenris Wolf will actually get to do its thing, so to speak. So yeah, this card being good depends entirely on how much kind of reactive tech is in the meta. Shang isn't the only relevant card here. For example, using something like Killmonger against a bounce deck, and then using this can bring back the highest power card that got destroyed, which might be relevant. So there are other applications there, but I expect this mainly to be used in tandem with Shang-Chi, and it will create a very powerful swing when it does so. And so with the direction I think this meta is likely to trend in, I think this card will be very powerful and highly played. Next up is Gore the God Butcher. 6 -1 ongoing, +2 power for each on reveal card in play. So Gore will get very big very quickly. I think he will be decent when he comes out. It really obviously depends on how many on reveals there are in the meta. There are a good amount of them right now, although there are a lot of ongoings too, which he doesn't really care about. But the main home for this card is going to be Mr. Negative. I think this very easily takes the place of Null in Mr. Negative. Just getting really big, being able to copy it with Zola, being able to play it for free. It just seems very powerful in a negative shell. And I'm not too sure if we'll see it much outside of that. Maybe in certain metas where on reveal is just really, really popular. But I think it is a pretty high cost to pay. And it remains to be seen just how big Gore will end up getting on average in the games where you're not using him in a Mr. Negative shell. So for that aspect, I'm not really sure how this card is going to turn out, but it seems like a A+ negative card that is likely going to replace Null in these stock lists, which is a powerful thing to be doing. So I'm excited for this card, even though I don't know if it's going to see a whole lot of play outside of the negative archetype, but there's definitely a possibility that it does, because this does count each on reveal card, not just your own, so it is counting the opponent's cards as well. So for that reason, I'm putting it in at number 3. Next up is Malekith. 4/6 on reveal. Add a 1, 2, or 3 cost card from your deck here. It reveals at the end of the game. I'm assuming you can see the card. Normally, I believe you can check on your unrevealed cards, I'm pretty sure. If you can't see the card, this gets even worse because you can't really play around it. But I'm not super high on this one. I mean, there will be high roll situations where you grab a powerful 3 cost, but a lot of the times 1 and 2 cost cards aren't really that powerful on their own, and a lot of their power is in their effect going off on the turn it goes off, and some of those effects are less meaningfully impactful on the final turn of the game. Think of a Korg or an Iceman or something like that. 3 drops are kind of an exception there, because I think there are a whole host of very powerful 3 drops that you don't care if it's not showing up till the end of the game. But even with some of those, you still do, like Cassandra Nova. You want to play that as soon as possible. So I think this will be okay, but honestly, it feels like Baron Zemo-ish, except obviously you're getting from your own deck instead of your opponent's, so you can build it in a way to maximize the effect, but it's also 1 extra cost and 1 extra power compared to Zemo. And I just don't really see it. I know a lot of people are pretty high on this card. I mean, maybe it will do something powerful, but especially in the context of the other cards releasing, most notably Surtur boosting the Scar deck and the other powerful decks we are already seeing in the meta right now, I find it hard to see where this card really ends up finding a place in the metagame, so I'm not super high on him personally. Then we have Frigga, 3/3 on reveal. Add a copy of the last card you played to your hand if able. So, I have seen a lot of takes about this card, and people seem very divided on if this card is really, really good or if it's really, really bad. Obviously, coming in at the second to lowest rating here, I'm in the really bad camp. But the thing is, I don't think the effect itself is actually that bad. I think there will be decks, particularly things like a Kitty Pride deck running Thena, that can make use of this, like copying a big kitty late in the game, playing Thena on 2 into Frigga on 3, or maybe you play Thena Kitty on 3 into Frigga Kitty on 4, and then get double Thena stuff going. I think there are powerful things to be done with this card. Obviously, the lore win interaction is just copying Thor's hammer, right? There are neat things you can do with this. I've seen a lot of comparisons to Moon Girl, but this is much better than Moon Girl because it's cheaper and you don't have to worry about your hand size as much. You're guaranteed to get a copy of that one thing you want. So I think the effect is powerful, but I don't think it's going to be powerful enough on this body in the context of the metagame we're in right now, or the metagame will be in once Surtur releases. I just have a hard time seeing this card being that impactful, just because the 3/3 stat line is so underwhelming that you really have to get crazy value off of the effect, and card advantage isn't really a super valuable thing in Marvel Snap due to the limited nature of the energy system and how many cards you can play out. Card advantage typically matters a lot less in this game compared to other games. And so while there will be powerful moments where you copy something really strong and that works out for you, I think everything needs to kind of line up for that to happen. And you end up asking yourself the question of, if everything is already lining up for this card to be good, is it not just a win more card? Because the situations where this card is good basically are the situations in which your deck is already doing the powerful thing it wants to do. It's already doing Kitty Thena. It's already drawing Mjolnir off Thor. So in the situations where you're already in a good position, it might put you in a little bit of a better position. But what happens when you're not in a good position? This card really doesn't do a lot to help put you back into a good position from a bad one. And I think that's kind of the definition of a win more card, and that's kind of what I see Frigga as right now. I think it's a powerful effect on an understated body that just isn't really worth the cost going into the current meta. It just does not feel like a 3/3 on 3 or a 3/3 copying a good thing on turn 4, turn 5 is really what a lot of decks need right now. So because of that, I just don't think this card is going to be good right away. But it wouldn't surprise me if this effect does become powerful in a different meta in the future, because copying a key card in a game where you're only allowed to use one-ofs is really strong. It's just I don't see it being strong right now. So a lot of potential for it in the future, but I don't think we're going to see some crazy impacts of it this season, unless something really radical happens with the balance change later on in the month. And last but not least, we have King Eitri, a 1/2 activate draw card that didn't start in your deck. So I think on average, this card is not going to be that great. Like a lot of decks aren't going to be able to want to run this, but the ones that do want to run this, I do think he can have a meaningful impact in. The main things that come to mind are things like Thanos, the Thor's deck, maybe Arsham, though honestly I don't expect Arsham to dedicate one of its 11 deck slots to this card, just drawing an extra card when that card could just be a random card rather than, you know, just getting one of the good cards you already put in your deck. But it'll be nice in Arsham when you generate it randomly, I suppose. But yeah, outside of that, I think Thanos and maybe the Thor's deck are probably going to be the two big ones here. This card is just not enough to help Thanos. We are getting a Thanos bundle later this month, and there is only one OTA patch coming this month. We'll talk about that at the end. But maybe Thanos finally gets a bit of a buff because he very sorely has needed it for a while. Card has been very, very bad. And yeah, King Eitri, if Thanos does become more playable, this is an auto-include in Thanos. It's kind of just like having an extra stone, but a bit of a delay on the draw. But that is totally okay. Thanos really values being able to cycle through its deck, so I do think this will become a mainstay in Thanos. The question is, does Thanos end up being good? And I don't think that's going to happen unless some very significant changes happen to the archetype. Outside of that, though, I could see this card seeing play in a Thor's deck. I think the most popular and powerful of the Thor's deck has been the more control-y oriented version that runs a bunch of tech cards along with Thor, Bill, and Jane. And having King Atari here just to make it so you are still getting a hammer in the games where you don't find your Jane, and just another body on board for the versions that run, let's say, Miss Marvel. It's really not a bad include in that kind of deck. I think most decks just don't really have a need for this specific card. So I don't think it's a bad card, but it's very niche, and the archetypes that it supports aren't the most powerful things to be doing right now. In Thanos' case, it's very far from that. So we'll have to see what happens with the meta, with the new cards, with the OTA, all that stuff. But for that reason, King Atari is going to be last on my list here. And I do want to quickly also mention that there have been some changes going on with the OTA schedule. Previously, they had an OTA scheduled for Thanksgiving. That has now been canceled. So there's only going to be one OTA for the month of November, as well as a patch 2 days before it. So patch on the 12th, OTA on the 14th. That's going to be the last OTA for about a month until the next patch and OTA come on the 10th and 12th of December. Not super unusual. Usually during the holidays season, we do see things slow down a bit and snap in. Looks like this year's no exception to that. But here's hoping that we have an okay meta to survive this long period of time. I mean, I'm sure if anything is super busted, they can probably do an emergency patch, but who knows if that's going to be needed or not. But yeah, I hope that the OTA is an impactful one and one people actually like, because the last few have not really been it. But yeah, that's going to wrap it up for this video. Let me know what you think about the new cards joining this season. Personally, I'm not as into this season as I was the last two. The last two were some of my favorite cards and characters we've had throughout the year of Snap, so they hit pretty hard. And this one just doesn't really do the same for me in terms of like characters and card design, though I am excited for some of these cards, most notably Surtur, Fenris Wolf, and Gore the God Butcher, but the other three I'm really not as interested in personally, though I will probably experiment with some of them regardless. But let me know what you think about the upcoming season. Which cards are you excited for? Which do you think are the best? And which other ones are you hoping to grab from the Spotlight system? That's going to wrap it up for this one, though. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.